The city of Balkh lay like a jewel in the vast deserts of the ancient world, glowing softly under the golden sun. Markets filled with the scent of saffron and roses. Scholars walked through sunlit courtyards, debating poetry and philosophy. The wind carried the distant sound of flutes, and children ran along the narrow streets, laughing. Among the gardens and stone pathways lived a boy named Jalaluddin Muhammad. The world would one day call him Rumi, but for now he was simply a child with bright eyes and a heart that felt deeper than he understood. He belonged to a family of scholars. His father, Bahauddin Walid, was a respected teacher loved by kings and common people alike. Men traveled great distances just to hear him speak about God, about love, about the mysteries of the soul. Rumi often sat quietly beside him, listening not only to the words, but to the music inside those words. Sometimes, late at night, Rumi would walk into the courtyard alone. The stars sparkled like silver lanterns in the sky. The moon shone softly on the fountain, turning the water into liquid light. He would sit near the fountain's edge, dipping his fingers into the cool water and whispering to himself. "What is this feeling inside me?" he wondered. "Why does the world feel so full of meaning?" He was young, perhaps no more than 8, but his heart felt older. Sometimes he felt joy without reason. Sometimes he felt sadness without pain. Sometimes he felt a longing, a deep, beautiful longing for something he could not name. The longing felt like music he could not hear completely, a voice calling him from far away. His father often watched him from a distance, smiling softly. "There is a fire in this child," Bahauddin whispered to himself. "A fire that will one day light the world." One morning, Rumi awoke before dawn. The sky was painted in soft colors, blue, purple, and rose. He walked through the orchard behind their home, brushing his fingertips across the apricot leaves still wet with dew. The birds had not yet begun their song. Everything felt peaceful, like the world was holding its breath. Then he heard something, a whisper, a presence, a feeling, not a voice in his ear, but a voice in his heart. "Seek," it seemed to say. Rumi stopped walking, his breath caught in his chest. "Seek what?" he whispered. There was no answer, but the feeling stayed, warm, mysterious, alive. He placed his hand over his heart and closed his eyes. "Who is speaking to me?" he asked softly. The silence that followed felt like a smile. At breakfast, his father looked at him closely. "You are quiet today, Jalal." Rumi hesitated. "Father, have you ever heard something that was not a sound?" Bahauddin studied him with gentle curiosity. "Explain, my son." Rumi looked down at his small hands. "Something like a voice that speaks inside your heart." His father's eyes softened. "Yes," he said, "that is the first doorway." "Doorway to what?" Rumi asked. "To God," his father answered. The words settled deep inside Rumi, like seeds planted in fertile soil. Days passed, then months, then years. Rumi grew taller, wiser, more thoughtful. He studied poetry, mathematics, philosophy, Quranic teachings, and languages. Scholars praised his intelligence. Students gathered around him even when he was still a teenager. They said he had the calmness of a river and the depth of a mountain. But inside him, the longing remained, growing, whispering, calling. "Seek." Then the world around him began to change. Whispers of danger blew across the desert winds. The Mongol armies were approaching, unstoppable, fierce, devouring city after city. Fear traveled faster than the soldiers. Families began to flee. Markets closed early. Streets grew quiet. One evening, Rumi found his father sitting beside a chest filled with books and important papers. He looked troubled. "Jalal," he said gently, "we must leave Balkh." Rumi's heart tightened. "Leave? But this is our home." "Our home is wherever God leads us," Bahauddin replied. "These are dangerous times. We must protect our family." Rumi swallowed hard. He looked at the familiar walls, the courtyard where he had whispered his first questions, the fountain where he had dipped his hands. He felt sorrow, but also a strange excitement, like destiny was pulling him forward. "Where will we go?" he asked. "Toward the west," his father said. "Toward safety, toward a future you cannot yet see." That night, Rumi walked through the garden one last time. The moon glowed softly, illuminating the flowers. He touched the trunk of an old tree and whispered goodbye. "Will I ever return?" he wondered. The same inner whisper he had felt as a child returned, gentle and tender. "Seek." Rumi closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks, not from fear, but from the weight of something that he could not name, something like destiny touching his shoulder. The next morning, they left Balkh. Rumi rode beside his father, the desert wind brushing against his face. Their caravan moved slowly across the vast land. Scholars, families, servants, animals, books tied carefully to saddles, hopes carried silently within hearts. They traveled through Nishapur, where the great poet Attar lived. Attar was an old man then, wise and filled with spiritual light. When he saw young Rumi, he stared for a long time with eyes that seemed to look into the future. "This boy," Attar whispered to Bahauddin, "will set the world on fire with his words." He gave Rumi a book, the Book of Secrets, and said, "Take this. One day you will understand its meaning." Rumi held the book to his chest, sensing its importance. Attar smiled, touched his head gently, and whispered, "The world has waited for you." And so the journey continued, through deserts and mountains, through cold nights and burning days, through towns with kind strangers and towns with frightened refugees fleeing the Mongol storm. Rumi learned patience, he learned humility, he learned compassion. Everywhere he went, he saw suffering, families separated, poverty, fear, and he felt his heart expand with love for people he did not know. His father watched him carefully. "Your heart is soft," Bahauddin said one night by the fire. "That softness will one day become your strength." But Rumi shook his head. "It feels like pain." "Pain is a teacher," his father replied gently. "One day you will understand." Finally, after years of traveling, the family reached Konya, a peaceful city in Anatolia. The people welcomed them warmly. The Sultan respected Bahauddin and offered him a place to teach. Rumi continued his studies, now a young man with gentle eyes and a growing wisdom. Students gathered around him. People traveled long distances to hear his words. He taught about kindness. He taught about the heart. He taught about surrender to God. But still, the longing inside him remained. One evening he walked through the marketplace alone. Lanterns glowed softly. Merchants packed away their goods. The sound of a reed flute drifted through the air, a sound so sad, so beautiful, that Rumi stopped in his tracks. The flute cried like a soul separated from its source. Rumi felt tears rise suddenly. "What is this feeling?" he whispered, and the familiar inner voice returned. "Seek, you are close." Rumi did not know it yet, but the turning point of his entire life was walking toward him. A man whose presence felt like lightning and water, fire and wind. A man whose voice would awaken the deepest chambers of Rumi's heart. a man who would become his mirror, his teacher, his beloved friend. His name was Shams of Tabriz, and when their souls met, the world would never be the same. Konya's streets glowed softly beneath the warm afternoon sun as Rumi walked toward the marketplace, unaware that destiny was already waiting for him. The air was filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts and freshly baked bread. Merchants folded colorful fabrics, children ran between stalls, and the gentle hum of everyday life echoed through the city. But inside Rumi's chest, something stirred, a quiet restlessness, like a bird fluttering beneath the ribs. He felt the same mystical pull he had felt since childhood, the whisper that had followed him from Balkh across mountains and deserts. Seek. The wind carried the fragrance of jasmine. The world around him felt unusually still, as if holding its breath. Then, through the crowd, a man appeared. Not a king, not a scholar, not a noble, but a wandering dervish dressed in simple, worn clothes. His beard was dark, his eyes intense, so intense that they seemed to pierce the world itself. He walked with a calmness that felt like deep oceans, and with a wildness that felt like fire. When he stopped directly in Rumi's path, the universe seemed to pause. "Peace upon you," the stranger said. Rumi returned the greeting politely, but something about the man's gaze made him feel exposed, as if the stranger could see into the center of his soul. "I am Shams of Tabriz," the man said. Rumi nodded respectfully, unaware that this name would one day become the fire of his poetry. Shams studied him silently, his eyes searching, questioning. Then he asked a single question. "Who is greater, Muhammad or the Sufi Saint Bayezid?" Rumi blinked in surprise. It was a question no one had ever asked him so boldly. Students gathered around him daily, eager for answers. Rumi always knew what to say, but this question felt like a doorway. He finally replied, "Prophet Muhammad is greater." Shams stepped closer. "Then why did Bayezid say, 'Glory be to me,' while the Prophet said, 'I cannot praise you enough'?" Rumi felt the air shift around him. This was no ordinary man. This question was no ordinary question. This moment was not ordinary time. Shams's eyes held a fire Rumi had never seen. He was not just asking for knowledge, he was asking for truth. Rumi took a slow breath, because the Prophet saw God with perfect clarity, and perfect clarity reveals our endless distance from God's infinite light. Shams's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. You understand the surface. Now come. Let us talk about the ocean." The marketplace buzzed around them, but Rumi heard nothing anymore. His heart beat loudly in his chest, like a drum calling him towards something unimaginable. He followed Shams into a quiet courtyard behind the mosque. The fountain there rippled gently in the wind. The sky glowed orange with the setting sun. They sat together, and they talked. They talked about God. They talked about the soul. They talked about love, longing, pain, surrender, truth. They talked until the sun went down, and then they talked long after the moon rose. Shams's words struck Rumi like lightning, breaking open chambers of his heart he never knew existed. "You speak of God," Shams said softly, "but have you ever died into him?" Rumi frowned. "Died?" Shams nodded. "Died to your ego, died to your pride, died to all the things that separate you from love." Rumi looked down at his hands. He had been a teacher, a scholar, a respected man. People bowed to him in the streets. Students kissed his hand. He answered every question with confidence, But Shams was not asking for answers. Shams was asking for truth, and truth humbled him. "Tell me," Shams continued, "why do you read so many books?" "To learn," Rumi replied. Shams shook his head. "No, books teach only words. Love teaches the soul." Rumi stared at him, unsure how to respond. Shams leaned close, his eyes fierce but warm. "Burn your knowledge, burn your pride, burn everything that keeps you from God. Only then will the heart speak." The wind brushed gently across the courtyard. Somewhere far away, a flute played a slow morning melody. Rumi felt something inside him tremble, something deep, something hidden. He whispered, "I feel afraid." Shams nodded. "Good. Every transformation begins with fear. A seed must break before it can grow." Night deepened, the stars shimmered. Lamps lit the stone pathways nearby. Shams stood and extended his hand. "Come, Rumi, walk with me." They walked through the silent streets. Their shadows stretched across the ground. Rumi felt as though he were walking behind a flame, and the heat of that flame was melting everything inside him. "Do you know what love is, Rumi?" Shams asked suddenly. Rumi hesitated. "Love is devotion, kindness, care." Shams stopped walking and turned to him. "No," he said softly. "Love is fire." The words struck Rumi like a blow to the chest. Love burns everything except the beloved. Love destroys the self so God may shine through. Rumi felt tears rise. He did not know why. Shams's voice became softer. "There is a loneliness inside you, Rumi, a longing you have carried since childhood." Rumi trembled. "How do you know?" he whispered. "Because I carry the same longing," Shams said, "and I have come to complete yours." The world seemed to tilt. The moonlight glowed brighter. Rumi felt a sudden warmth spread across his chest. Destiny had arrived, not gently, but like a storm breaking open the sky. From that moment, Rumi and Shams were inseparable. They sat together for hours each day, lost in conversation deeper than oceans. Rumi asked questions he had never dared to ask. Shams shattered every answer. He pushed Rumi past the edges of words into the land of experience. One evening, as they sat beneath a cypress tree, Shams said, "You know God with your mind, but I want you to know God with your heart." Rumi closed his eyes. "Teach me." Shams placed a hand on Rumi's chest, over his heart. "Then let this be the beginning. Listen, not with your ears, but with your soul." Rumi sat very still. The night wind rustled the leaves. The stars shimmered above. He listened deeply, letting his thoughts fall away. And then he felt it. A presence, a warmth, a love so vast it made him tremble. Shams whispered, "This is the doorway you have been seeking." Rumi opened his eyes slowly. Tears streamed down his face. "What is happening to me?" he whispered. Shams smiled gently. "Your heart is waking up." Days turned into weeks. Their bond grew stronger, so strong that the world noticed. Rumi's students grew jealous. Scholars whispered angrily. People in the city talked. "What has happened to our teacher? He spends all his time with this stranger. Shams is stealing him away." Something strange is happening between them. Rumi ignored the noise. Shams ignored the noise. Their connection was not of this world. It was soul to soul, two flames merging into one fire. One day, Shams looked at Rumi and said, "You are ready." "For what?" Rumi asked. "To die." Rumi's heart tightened. "To die?" Shams nodded. "To your old self, to your ego, to your pride. Only then will you be reborn." Rumi swallowed hard. "I am afraid." Shams stepped closer, placing his hands gently on Rumi's shoulders. "I will walk through the fire with you. A long silence followed. Rumi whispered, "Shams, who are you?" Shams answered with quiet certainty, "I am the mirror in which you will see God." Those words broke something inside Rumi, broke it beautifully. He felt light. He felt heavy. He felt lost. He felt found. He felt as if the entire universe had entered his chest. From that day on, Rumi was no longer the scholar he once was. His words became poetry. His prayers became music. His presence became fire. People whispered, "Rumi is changing. Rumi is becoming something else. What has Shams done to him?" But Rumi knew the truth. Shams had not changed him. Shams had awakened him, and the world would soon be transformed by the poetry born from that awakening. The days that followed were unlike anything Rumi had ever known. Konya felt different now. Its streets brighter, its air warmer, its nights deeper. Because everywhere he went, Shams's presence was beside him like a flame that refused to die. They would sit beneath the old cypress trees until the stars faded into dawn, speaking of the mysteries of the soul. Shams did not teach through books. He taught through silence, through questions, through presence. Sometimes they would walk through the city without saying a word. Yet Rumi felt as if an entire universe was speaking between them. "Shams," he asked once, "why does your silence feel louder than words?" Shams smiled, "Because silence is the language of God." Rumi repeated the words softly, letting them melt into his heart. The language of God. They walked past a baker's shop. The warm smell of bread filled the air. People nodded respectfully to Rumi, the great scholar, the honored teacher. But some of them now whispered angrily behind his back, "Shams controls him. Rumi has become blind. He is abandoning his students. This dervish is dangerous." Rumi did not hear them. Or perhaps he heard but did not care. He felt alive in a way he could not explain. Every moment with Shams felt like light passing through a colored window, painting the world in brighter colors. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the trees, Shams asked him, "What do you fear most, Rumi?" Rumi thought for a long time. "Losing God," he said softly. Shams shook his head. "You fear losing yourself." Rumi hesitated. "Why is that wrong?" "Because," Shams answered, "you must lose yourself completely before you can find God." The words struck Rumi like a bell. They vibrated inside him. He understood them, but he also feared them. Lose myself? Disappear into love? Let everything burn? How? Rumi whispered. Shams leaned close, his eyes burning like fire. Through love. Only love can destroy the ego. Only love can turn a scholar into a mystic. Only love can turn a man into a poem. Rumi felt a tremble inside him, part fear, part longing. "You are changing me," Rumi whispered. "No," Shams said. "I am showing you who you really are." For a moment, Rumi felt weightless, like a bird whose cage had just been opened. But not everyone celebrated his awakening. Rumi's students grew resentful. They were used to being close to him, receiving his attention, his teachings, his gentle praise. But now they found the doors to his study locked. They found Rumi walking alone with Shams. They heard laughter between the two men that made them burn with jealousy. One of the students whispered to another, "He has forgotten us." Another replied bitterly, "No, he has chosen Shams over all of us." Their resentment grew. Their whispers turned to anger. Anger turned to plotting. Shams felt the storm forming long before Rumi did. One evening they sat in a quiet courtyard. The sky was deep blue, and a cold wind began to rise. "Something is changing," Shams said softly. Rumi looked up. "What do you mean?" The people around you grow restless. Shams replied. Jealous hearts are dangerous. Rumi shook his head. They will understand. No, Shams said firmly. They will not. A silence fell between them. Shams looked away, his expression distant. I came into your life to awaken your heart, but awakenings are not gentle. They shake worlds. Rumi felt worry tighten his chest. Are you leaving? Shams did not answer. Rumi stood quickly. No, you cannot leave. My heart, it has just begun to see. Shams placed a hand on Rumi's cheek, a gesture of deep affection and spiritual closeness. You do not need me forever, he whispered. But I want you, Rumi said, voice trembling. Shams closed his eyes for a moment. Attachment is beautiful, but it is also dangerous. Rumi shook his head. Shams, you are my mirror. Without you, I cannot see myself. Shams opened his eyes slowly. Then you must learn to carry the mirror inside you. The wind rustled the leaves around them. A lantern flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Inside Rumi's home, voices rose. Shams is manipulating him. He has stolen our teacher. Rumi no longer belongs to us. We must do something. Rumi heard none of it. He was only aware of the man standing before him, the man who had turned his world into light and fire. Promise me you will not leave, Rumi whispered. Shams looked at him with infinite tenderness. A moth does not promise the flame that it will stay. It just burns until it is gone. Rumi felt his heart break slightly at those words. That night, Shams disappeared. Konya woke to the sound of Rumi's footsteps rushing through the streets, his voice calling out desperately. Shams! Shams! Where are you? He went to every marketplace, every alley, every corner of the city. He knocked on doors. He stopped travelers. He ran until he could barely breathe. Have you seen him? The man from Tabriz? The dervish with burning eyes? No one had seen him. Or perhaps no one would admit it. Rumi returned home exhausted. His chest ached. His hands trembled. He had never known such fear, such emptiness. He sank to the floor of his study and whispered, God, why have you taken him from me? But inside the silence, he heard nothing. Days passed, nights passed, the city moved on. But Rumi did not. He searched again and again, walking miles outside Konya, wandering through fields, deserts, mountains. He questioned travelers, caravans, shepherds. Have you seen a wandering dervish called Shams? No, they all said. No, no, no. His heart broke piece by piece. His family begged him to rest. His students begged him to return to teaching. But Rumi could not return. Something inside him had been torn open, and he could not close it again. One night, after weeks of grief, Rumi walked into the courtyard. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the fountain. He stood there trembling, feeling the cold wind on his skin. He whispered to the night, Why did you leave me? Why did you come at all, if you were only going to disappear? This silence felt like a wound. He closed his eyes and for the first time truly felt the depth of his love for Shams. Not a love of the mind, but a love of the soul. A love so powerful it could break a man and remake him. A soft voice rose inside him. Not a voice from outside, but from within. I have not left. I am inside you now. Rumi gasped. His knees weakened. Tears spilled down his face. He fell to the ground, whispering, Shams, Shams, Shams. It was no longer a name. It was a prayer, a heartbeat, a flame. And in that moment of unbearable loneliness, something extraordinary began, a poem. Rumi felt words rising inside him like water breaking through stone. Come, come, whoever you are. His voice trembled. His tears fell onto the stone path. Though you have broken your vows 1,000 times. The wind carried his words softly. Come, yet again. Come, come. The poetry flowed out of him like a river that had finally found its ocean. It poured through him, raw, burning, divine. Sorrow turned into verse. Longing turned into music. Pain turned into beauty. Rumi realized something. Shams had not abandoned him. Shams had become the fire inside him. And Rumi was beginning to burn. Days turned into weeks, and Rumi moved through Konya like a shadow. He walked with his head lowered, his steps slow, his eyes unfocused. The world around him continued. Children ran through the markets, merchants argued over prices, mothers called their sons home. But Rumi heard none of it. He listened only to the quiet ache inside his chest. Sometimes he would sit beside the fountain in the courtyard, staring at the rippling water as if waiting for Shams's reflection to appear. Sometimes he would walk to the edge of the city, looking down long roads that stretched toward faraway mountains. He whispered into the wind, "Come back to me. Wherever you are, return." But the wind carried no answer. One evening, after months of longing, something strange happened. Rumi was sitting in his library, surrounded by books he could no longer read. His students gathered outside the door, arguing quietly. "He is no longer our teacher." Shams broke him. "He has lost himself." Rumi's eyes filled with tears. He closed the book he was not reading and stood up. The room felt heavy, suffocating. He walked outside into the garden. The night air was cool. The moon glowed softly. He knelt in the grass and whispered, "God, if Shams is gone forever, take my voice, take my breath, take everything. Just don't take this love from my heart." A tear fell onto the earth, and then a sound, a familiar sound. Footsteps. Rumi froze. His body trembled. His breath stopped. He lifted his head slowly. Under the moonlight stood Shams, alive, real. Standing only a few steps away, for a moment, the world became weightless. Rumi could not move. Neither could Shams. They simply stared at one another, two souls meeting again after being torn apart. Rumi rose to his feet, his voice breaking. "Shams, is it you?" Shams stepped forward, his eyes soft with emotion. "Did you doubt I would return?" Rumi did not answer. He rushed forward and embraced him, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might vanish again. Shams placed a hand on Rumi's back, steady and warm. "I am here," he whispered. "I have always been here." Rumi pulled back, tears streaming down his face. "Where did you go? Why did you leave me?" Shams looked away for a moment. "The hearts around you grew dangerous. Jealousy is a blade sharper than any sword. I left so you would be safe. But without you," Rumi said, voice trembling, "I died." Shams shook his head gently. "You did not die. You were reborn." Rumi did not understand. Not yet. He only knew joy, overwhelming and bright to see Shams again. The news of Shams's return spread through Konya like wildfire. Some people rejoiced quietly, happy for Rumi, but many were furious. "He has come back. We cannot let him stay. He will destroy our teacher completely." Jealousy grew like poisoned vines wrapping around the community. Even Rumi's own family felt torn. Some loved Shams for awakening Rumi's soul. Others hated him for taking Rumi away from them. But Rumi did not care what anyone thought. He spent every moment with Shams again. They walked through orchards. They prayed side by side. They discussed the mysteries of love and the soul. Shams asked him one night, "What burns in your heart now, Rumi?" Rumi answered softly. "The fire you lit." Shams nodded. "Then soon you will not need me." "Don't say that," Rumi whispered. "Stay." Shams smiled sadly. "Love does not cling, Rumi. Love lets go." Those words frightened Rumi, but he pushed the fear aside. Their bond grew deeper than before. Rumi became filled with new questions, new visions, new desires to understand the secrets of the universe. Shams challenged him more fiercely now, pushing him to the edge of spiritual truth. "You must love God not with your mind," Shams told him, "but with your soul's blood." "How?" Rumi asked. "By becoming nothing," Shams replied. "Only then will you become everything." Rumi closed his eyes, trying to understand the impossible. But in the shadows, danger was rising again. The same students who hated Shams before now feared his return even more. Their anger turned darker. They whispered in alleys. They met in secret rooms. Their jealousy hardened like stone. One night, while Rumi was teaching outside, Shams sat alone in the courtyard. The lanterns flickered. The air felt strange, too still, too quiet. A group of men approached him. "You should leave, Kanya," one of them said. "Forever." Shams looked at them calmly. "If God wills me to stay, I will stay." One man stepped closer, anger burning in his eyes. "You have ruined our teacher. You have taken him from us." Shams remained silent. Another man spat at his feet. "We will not allow this anymore." Shams looked up at the sky as if listening to something only he could hear. That night was the last time anyone saw him alive. When Rumi returned and found Shams missing again, a familiar fear pierced his heart. But this time was different. This time the city felt cold, heavy, filled with guilt. Rumi asked everyone he met, "Where is he? Did you see him? Has he passed by?" But people lowered their eyes. Some looked ashamed. Some looked afraid. Some looked guilty. Rumi's heart pounded. He searched the markets, the streets, the hills outside the city. He rode for hours, calling Shams's name until his voice broke. But silence answered him. He returned home, fell to the ground, and cried in agony. "God, is this the end? Have you taken him from me again? Is this part of your plan?" He cried until his tears ran dry. His body shook. His breath grew faint. And in his grief, something happened. Something impossible. Something sacred. Something that would change the world forever. A voice rose inside him. Not Shams's voice, not his own, but a divine echo. "Burn, Rumi. Burn until nothing of you remains except love." Rumi sat up slowly. His pain did not disappear, but it transformed. It became heat. It became movement. It became music. He stood, trembling, and began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, then faster. His robe spread around him like wings. His tears fell to the ground. His breath became prayer. Around him, the world blurred. The earth spun. He spun. His soul spun. He felt himself dissolving into air, into light, into God. This was the first turning, the first whirling, the birth of the Sufi dance that would circle the world for centuries. Rumi whispered as he spun, "Shams, you are not gone. You are in my breath, in my blood, in my soul." His turning slowed. He fell to his knees, exhausted, overwhelmed. And for the first time since Shams vanished, Rumi did not feel alone. He realized something profound. Shams had not disappeared. Shams had become the fire inside him, the voice of his poems, the beat of his heart, the movement of his turning. From that night on, Rumi began to write. Words poured from him like water from a broken spring. Poems of longing, poems of union, poems of divine love, poems of Shams. He wrote, "I was dead, then alive, weeping, then laughing. The power of love came into me and I became fire. Konya soon filled with the sound of Rumi's poems, recited in streets, sung by traveling dervishes, but whispered by lovers, prayed by seekers. People said, "This is not human poetry. This is divine fire. This is love speaking." Rumi had lost Shams, but in losing him, he found God. And through God, he found the poetry that would make him immortal. After the second disappearance of Shams, Rumi was never the same. But he was also never again the man he had been before their meeting. It was as if Shams had carved open the very center of his heart, revealing a hidden world that Rumi had carried his whole life without knowing it. A world of fire, a world of longing, a world of divine love. For weeks, Rumi walked through Konya silently, like a man carrying an ocean inside him. His eyes held a faraway light. People who saw him whispered, "He is changed. He sees something we cannot see. He hears something we cannot hear." One morning, as the sun rose gently over the rooftops, Rumi returned to the courtyard where he had once spoken with Shams under the moonlight. The fountain still rippled softly. The old cypress trees still swayed. Rumi stood there with closed eyes and whispered, "My teacher, my friend, my mirror. I feel you inside my breath." The wind touched his face as softly as a hand. He opened his eyes, lifted his right arm toward the sky, and placed his left hand over his heart. Then he began to turn again, slow, gentle circles, each turn a prayer, each breath a poem. Merchants stopped and stared. Passing travelers paused. Children watched in awe. And Rumi? He turned as if the world itself was spinning around him. His robe flowed like white wings. His feet moved like they were guided by the earth itself. His body swayed with grace, surrender, joy, and longing. This was no dance. This was remembrance, a way of returning to God through motion, breath, rhythm, surrender. People gathered around him. Some cried, some prayed, some simply watched, unable to understand why their hearts ached with beauty. When Rumi finally stopped, he whispered, "Love. Love is a bridge between you and everything." He walked away quietly, leaving the crowd speechless. Rumi's turning became a daily ritual. Then it became a teaching. Then it became a path. Men who felt lost began to join him. Men who carried pain began to join him. Men who longed for God more than for the world began to join him. They turned with him. They breathed with him. They prayed with him. This was the beginning of the Mevlevi order, the whirling dervishes, not a group of dancers, not a group of musicians, a group of seekers who turned their entire beings toward God. But the turning alone was not enough to express the ocean inside Rumi. Something else was happening inside him, something powerful, unstoppable. Words. Words filled his chest like birds trying to fly free. Words of love, longing, union, loss, joy, divine intoxication. Words that felt older than time. Words that felt like whispers from heaven. One afternoon, a devoted student named Hussam Chalebi approached Rumi with a shy expression. "Master," he said softly, "your words. They move through people like healing. Would you write them down?" Rumi looked at him with gentle sadness. "Hussam, my heart is too full. The words come like rain. I cannot hold them still long enough to capture them." Hussam stepped closer. "Then speak, master. Speak, and I will write." Rumi smiled faintly. A warm wind blew through the courtyard, lifting a few fallen leaves into the air. It felt like a sign. "Very well," Rumi whispered. "Let us begin." Hussam sat beside him, ink and paper ready. Rumi closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke. What he spoke was not poetry. It was a river, a fire, a universe opening. He spoke of the reed flute crying for its source. He spoke of the lover searching for the beloved. He spoke of the soul longing for return. He spoke of God as light, warmth, fire, and friend. Hussam wrote until his fingers ached. Rumi spoke until his voice trembled. Hours passed, days passed, months passed. The poems became thousands of lines, then tens of thousands. They became stories, metaphors, spiritual lessons, yet written so simply that even a farmer could understand the deepest truths inside them. One evening, Hussam looked up from the pages and whispered, "Master, this is not a book. This is a sea." Rumi touched the paper gently. "This is Shams." Hussam hesitated. "But Shams is gone." Rumi placed a hand over his heart. "He is the pen. I am only the paper." And so began the writing of the Masnavi, one of the greatest works of spiritual literature ever created. Every poem carried a trace of Shams. Every metaphor held the scent of divine love. Every story echoed the fire that had burned Rumi's heart open. People said, "These are not poems. These are windows into heaven." No human can write such words. This is the language of the soul. But Rumi knew the truth. The poems did not belong to him. They belonged to the love that had broken him open, to the longing that refused to rest, to the disappearance that had forced him to turn inward, to Shams. One night, while Rumi was writing under the soft light of an oil lamp, Hussam asked him, "Master, do you miss Shams?" Rumi looked at the flame of the lamp and whispered, "Every moment." Hussam hesitated. "And yet, you are more alive now than ever." Rumi smiled. "That is what love does. It breaks you, but into light." His words filled the room like perfume. Rumi's fame began to spread beyond Konya. Travelers brought stories of him to Persia, Syria, India, Arabia. People walked for weeks just to hear him speak for a single hour. They said, "He does not teach from books. He teaches from the heart. He teaches from love." Some nights, the courtyard outside his home overflowed with thousands of listeners. They sat under the stars while Rumi recited epic verses that made strong men cry and old women whisper prayers. He spoke of the lover and the beloved, of the moth and the flame, of the ocean and the drop, of the heart that becomes a mirror of God. And still he turned. He turned in grief. He turned in joy. He turned in remembrance. He turned in surrender. His disciples asked him, "Master, why do you turn?" Rumi smiled gently. "Because the earth turns, and every atom dances. Why should I not?" He placed one hand toward the sky, the other toward the earth. "I take from heaven," he said softly, "and give to the world." With every spin, he felt closer to Shams. With every breath, he felt closer to God. With every poem, he felt closer to the truth burning inside him. He whispered to himself often, "Wherever I turn, there is you." Konya had once feared Shams, but now Konya loved Rumi. They listened to his poems at dawn. They repeated them in the streets. They sang them in gatherings. They carried them into their prayers. And slowly, the world began to change. Rumi's words crossed borders, traveled through deserts and mountains, reached kings and beggars alike. His message was simple. Love is the answer. Love is the path. Love is the teacher. Love is God. He taught that every religion, every heart, every soul was connected through love. He taught unity in a world divided by fear. He taught compassion in a time of war. He taught hope in a time of despair. But behind all his poems, all his whirling, all his teachings, there remained a quiet truth known only to Rumi. He never stopped missing Shams. One night, after finishing another section of the Masnavi, he held the pages in his hands and whispered, "My friend, my flame, my guide, everything I write, every breath I take is your fragrance." The lamp flickered gently as if agreeing, and Rumi smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude, for he finally understood. Shams had never disappeared. He had become the fire through which Rumi illuminated the world. Years passed like gentle winds brushing across the plains of Kanya. Rumi's hair slowly turned silver. His beard grew softer, fuller. His face carried the warmth of a man who had walked through fire and come out shining. But his eyes, those bright, searching, luminous eyes, never changed. They still carried the same longing, the same tenderness, the same spark of divine wonder that had been awakened by Shams. Every morning before sunrise, Rumi walked into the courtyard where the fountain whispered softly. He sat near the water, closed his eyes, and listened. Not for the world, not for the noise of people, but for the silence within. And in that silence, he still heard the presence he had known all his life, the whisper, "Seek." Except now, he no longer searched for it outside himself. He found it in his breath, in his heartbeat, in the turning of the earth, in the pain and joy of every soul he met. Students gathered around him daily, hundreds of them. Some traveled for months through deserts and mountains just to hear him speak for a moment. When they arrived, exhausted and dusty, Rumi welcomed them with open arms. He offered them food, water, prayer, poetry. Sometimes he embraced them, whispering, "You are home." Because for Rumi, every human heart was a home of God. He taught that love was not a feeling but a transformation. He taught that pain was not a curse but an opening. He taught that longing was not weakness but a bridge to the divine. He taught that the heart was not a place for fear but a place for God to dance. People of all religions came to him, Christians, Jews, Muslims, travelers with no religion at all. They sat at his feet quietly while he spoke of unity. "Labels divide us," he would say gently. "Love unites us." He never punished anyone for their beliefs. He never pushed anyone away. He saw God inside everyone, even those who rejected him. One afternoon, a man came to Rumi and said, "Master, I am full of sins. I am ashamed to stand before you." Rumi smiled softly. "Then come closer. Shame is only the door through which God enters." The man fell to his knees, crying. Rumi placed a hand on his head and whispered, "You are not the wound, you are the healing." And the man wept until his heart became light. As the years went on, Rumi's poems continued to pour out of him. They flowed like rivers that never ran dry. Hussam Chalebi wrote endlessly, page after page, year after year, capturing every word Rumi spoke. Thousands of verses filled their rooms, thousands of stories, thousands of metaphors. Every poem was a flame, every story a mirror, every verse a doorway. One night, as Rumi walked under the stars, Hussam approached him holding the newest pages of the Masnavi. "Master," Hussam whispered, "this book, it is enormous. 6 volumes, thousands of lines. Do you wish to continue?" Rumi looked at the sky. The moon glowed softly. "The Masnavi," he said, "is not my book. It is God's breath. It will continue as long as the breath continues." Hussam nodded, tears filling his eyes. Rumi's compassion grew deeper with age. He visited the poor, the sick, the lonely. He fed orphans with his own hands. He sat with dying men and held their hands as they crossed into the next world. He comforted widows, encouraged broken hearts, and prayed for enemies. One winter evening, a group of starving beggars came to Konya, cold and shivering. Rumi saw them from afar, rushed toward them, removed his warm cloak, and covered them with it. One of his students cried out, "Master, you will freeze." Rumi smiled. A warm heart is better than a warm cloak. And he walked home in the cold, but his heart glowed brighter than the moon. As Rumi grew older, the world began to feel his fragrance far beyond Konya. His poems reached Persia, India, Baghdad, Damascus. Merchants carried his verses along the Silk Road. Travelers memorized his lines and recited them under desert skies. Stories of the whirling dervishes spread, men in white robes turning like planets around the sun, their right hands raised to receive God's love, their left hands lowered to give that love to the world. People said, "No teacher has ever spoken like him. He does not divide, he unites. He speaks the language of the heart." But even as thousands followed him, Rumi remained humble. He often told his students, "If you see goodness in me, that is God. If you see faults in me, that is myself." He laughed often. He cried easily. He loved deeply. He lived as if every soul was precious, because to him, every soul was God wearing a new disguise. One autumn evening, when Rumi was nearly 70, he felt a strange stillness in his chest. It was not pain. It was not fear. It was a familiar whisper. Soon, he understood. The final journey was calling him. His students noticed him growing weaker. His voice softened. His steps slowed. But his eyes, those glowing eyes, became even brighter, like lamps preparing to return their flame to the sun. He whispered to Hussam, "I feel Shams near." Hussam's voice trembled. "Master, are you leaving us?" Rumi smiled gently. "A lover never leaves. He simply changes rooms." His students gathered around him. Hundreds of people stood outside his home, praying, crying, waiting. Even Christians, Jews, monks, priests, and travelers came to hold vigil. Everyone loved him. Everyone feared losing him. Everyone prayed for a miracle. But Rumi did not want a miracle. He wanted union with God. "My whole life," he whispered, "has been a preparation for this night." He called it Sheb Aris, the wedding night, not a night of death, but a night of union, the night the soul returns to its beloved. As his final hours came, Rumi's family sat beside him. His son, Sultan Veled, held his hand. Hussam cried softly. Students whispered prayers through tears. Rumi's breathing grew slow, gentle, peaceful. He whispered his last words. "When we are dead, seek us in the poems, seek us in the turning, seek us in the hearts of lovers. We are not gone. We are only moving from the seen into the unseen." A soft smile touched his lips. A final breath left his body, and the room filled with a strange, beautiful silence. Outside, the people began to weep. But then something extraordinary happened. Christians carried candles. Jews lifted holy songs. Muslims recited prayers. Monks, priests, scholars, beggars, travelers, all walked together in a single procession. No one argued. No one claimed ownership. No one spoke of difference. They knew the truth. Rumi belonged to all of them, and all of them belonged to him. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Kings disappeared. Cities changed. Languages evolved. But Rumi's words remained. His poems became lanterns for lonely hearts. His teachings became medicine for wounded souls. His stories became bridges for people of different faiths. His whirling became a symbol of surrender and love. Today, his voice travels across the world in books, in music, in classrooms, in hearts. People read him when they are lost. People quote him when they are in love. People whisper him when they pray. And though the world has changed, his message remains the same. Love is the answer. Love is the path. Love is God. In every turning dervish, in every lover's heart, in every poem of longing, Rumi lives. Not as a memory, but as a flame, a guide, a friend, a voice still whispering, "Come, come whoever you are, though you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come, come."